saw some notes. Absolutely, the safety and soundness of the clearinghouse itself. I mean, you do want to actually kick the tires on our margin methodology, and obviously how is our guarantee fund, the size of our guarantee fund in the event of a default of the clearinghouse. Obviously, all that's laid out in our rules and our policies and procedures. So you definitely need to take a look at that. And yes, under Dodd-Frank, the regulations, a lot of that is dictated to us based on the regulations themselves. But there are some items where we can actually have impact on what our model does look like. So that's things that you do need to take a look at. Certainly, our product offering, the breadth and depth of products that are currently available to you. Within any asset class that is particularly of interest to you. Expertise in that space, how long have they been live? How long have they been risk managing that product itself? So you need to take a look at that. Is the solution tailored to that product? Are capital efficiencies available within those product classes itself? So those are definitely all things that you do need to take a look at. I know that everybody obviously is meeting with their FCMs, and obviously they're well versed, I think, in the solutions that all the clearinghouses absolutely provide, and those are your FCM really, that is where your relationship is going to be, and certainly you're spending a lot of time with them. But as Jeff mentioned, we are here and available, and certainly that's what I do, spend a lot of my time directly with buy-side clients actually providing that education, because sometimes it's useful to hear us directly from us, and those 265-page rule books are a little bit to go through, so we can come in and actually help sort of narrow it down for you and explain actually how our solution works.
So the rumor that you'll compete on margin is not true? No one even wants to answer.
Well, coming at it from, I guess, a DCM perspective, I've run the testing efforts for the bank across all the products and across all the clearinghouses. So I think, as regulation has changed a bit, I think obviously the risk and governance structures are the most important piece of the selection process. I think there was, obviously, margin efficiency, so we say, between the clearinghouses, and obviously we know some of the margin models are evolving over time from the clearinghouses. And I think the product coverage initially, if we did go live on July 16th, the product coverage gaps, I guess, had closed a bit. So if you look at interest rate product now from some of the various clearinghouses, where one had maybe a lot more product coverage prior to more recent efforts, I think that the product coverage now is basically a lot more competitive. And I think you see the margin models are more competitive now too. So I think, as Mark said, I think if you need to be very comfortable, the CCP is your counterparty, and you need to be very comfortable with the structure.
That was very diplomatic, not naming any names. That was well said.
I thought Jeff was going to pick a winner there. I'm excited.
We were all listening. So I guess then the next fair question, and there's a lot of nuance on the trading side. So we'll talk about CEF. So anonymous trading, RFQ, central limit order book, all the things that we all like to talk about. Maybe the way we should start the CEF conversation is, let's ask it the same way. I mean, how do the CEFs compete? And I know, liquidity begets liquidity, but you have to have some liquidity to start. So how do the CEFs compete? What are how are you going to attract that liquidity in the first place?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think there's certain things that you need to just have to turn up to the game, and these are just sort of qualifying criteria as opposed to distinguishing criteria. And those are the pretty obvious ones. You need to have a decent pool of liquidity. You need to have links to clearing, and you need to have some basic workflow that supports some of the buy-side needs. I think those are pretty much given if you include in that product set as well. You need those things just to turn up to the game, I think. I think the way here at Bloomberg anyway, we try and differentiate ourselves is we try and integrate the trading aspect with some powerful pre-trade price transparency. So that's one component. So for example, on the Bloomberg, not only do we have the pricing from dealers, but we can feed that pricing into all sorts of analysis tools, whether there's graphing, whether there's historic comparison, whether that's even to some extent scraping messages to compare against quotes. So there's the pre-trade price transparency angle, we offer a rich environment to do that, outside of the trading. I think that's one angle. I think another angle that we try and differentiate ourselves in is that once you've done the trade, there's going to be all sorts of calculations that you're going to need to understand, whether that's understanding what the margin call from your DCM is and being able to analyze it on a portfolio. Then Bloomberg has powerful analysis tools that we'll use to enhance the trading side of it. And then in addition to that component, we have all of our standard analytics tools that some of you will use already. Just all the calculators that are available, all the cash flow analysis tools, and all the portfolio valuation tools. And that that if you bear in mind, there's a bigger world than just CEF and cleared stuff. I mean, some of you will trade swaptions, some of you will trade callable stuff. I mean, you can model that and have that in a portfolio in Bloomberg and value that along with your cleared stuff. So really the differentiator, the value add is integration with pre-trade price discovery tools and post-trade analytics.
I think we're doing it a little bit differently, obviously. We focus on what we do well and what we've done well in the past. First being, of course, trade execution, ease of execution, kind of to Nathan's point, sort of the things we needed to build to get, to be in the game. We made some, calculated decisions early on. Corry mentioned, in our opening remarks, we don't know what the rules are going to look like for a CEF. But there are proposed rules out there. You've got to have request for quote, price transparency, the ability to leave orders, and order book technology. So those are investments. We kind of built off of the existing trading platform, and we made those investments early on. Now there's a possibility that when the final rules come out, that it won't be used. Certain clients will want to trade one way, others will trade another way. It's a possibility that we've made certain investments that we're going to have to put to the side. But that's okay. To be in the game, you have to make these sort of calculated risks. So we're focusing on the trade execution on that standpoint. And a lot of the other thing that we do really well, is we link in with sort of the third-party order management systems, risk systems, all the kind of middleware vendors that are in the marketplace. A perfect example being Calypso. So clients are using the Calypso system. They do all their modeling and order creation on that system. They can then flow straight through processing into the Tradeweb marketplace for execution. And I think what we've seen over time, whereas when we first started first opened the marketplace for both treasuries and then later on for derivatives, straight through processing or linking into external systems was sort of a nice to have. Well, I think that game's over. Now people are if they're in the marketplace, straight through processing is a must have. If I'm going to execute in one place, I don't want to have to worry about hiring 5 guys to make sure that this trade gets entered into this accounting system one way and it matches what's getting entered into this clearing system here. Sort of those pipes, and that's kind of where we see some value that we're providing is in that kind of the network itself.
So one of the other big outstanding questions, well, there's a few of them, but one of the big outstanding questions, in a bilateral world, of course, you need to know who you're trading with at the time of execution, especially if an RFQ, right? You ask for quotes from certain people and you choose. In the cleared world, in theory, it won't matter who's on the other side of the trade because it's always the clearinghouse. So can and will trading be anonymous, both whether it's an order book or an RFQ?
Well, I think with an RFQ model, what we've been we're kind of looking at it from a technology standpoint. We could go either way, but in discussions with our clients and in reading the comment letters that are on the CFTC websites, we think that for some of our larger clients and some of the bigger asset managers, for example, they find value in the knowing who their name is providing them value with their counterparties. So I don't think for that type of trading, especially for large size, I don't think that the anonymity is going to be the answer for those types of clients in that type of trading. There may be other clients who their name is not such, may not be a marquee name, so they see value in smaller trades done anonymously. But we'll have to we're playing, not wait and see, but we're making investments on both sides, kind of to see where it ends up.
Right, right. And I've heard similar, although, so the flip side to that is by knowing if those, it limits the ability for new entrants to come in and make quotes in that space, because if those big asset managers have bigger agreements with those brokers, they could, in theory, they could execute at an inferior price because they have other arrangements and things where it makes it where they need to or they want to execute there, rather than going to a new guy who's going to actually give them a better price.
Right. Well, I mean, it comes down to what is best execution,
right.
And that could be a whole other panel and a whole other.
We'll save that for the next Calypso drinking evening.
Good idea, right, guys?
Write that down. Okay.
Yeah. The other point on that, anonymous or not, is that, as you mentioned, Kevin, in the future world, shouldn't matter, but it seems the reality currently is that a lot of people are nervous about the idea of I'm going to execute a trade and then it will fail to clear, and what happens in that fail to clear environment. So, right now it seems that people will feel a little bit uncomfortable not knowing who's on the other side of that trade in the instance it fails to clear, and so people seem to have some comfort in the RFQ model currently. For that reason, they still want to know who they trade with, and then as Bill points out, there are other reasons why often it's useful to know who you're trading with. I mean, often people aren't trading swaps in isolation; they're trading them in conjunction with other products. And if you're about to execute, and one of the choices in front of you has a whole host of, has a combination of that product, then you may choose that direction. Or one of the providers may have better post-trade servicing for some of the derivatives. So there are other factors. So it seems the short term, it seems unlikely to be. It's unlikely that anonymity will be that popular. But having said that, there does seem to be a segment of the market that are excited by the idea of taking prices without taking or putting prices out there without people knowing who they are. And then those are some of the certain segment of the buy side.
So perfect segue. Let's assume it's 2013 and all the rules are in place. What does happen if a trade is rejected from clearing after it's executed? Or will that even be allowed to happen? Or how often will it happen? How does that all work?
I mean, as far as I've read, from what I know of the rules, it's not a trade. Because if you have a clearable trade, it has to clear. So if it doesn't clear, then it's not a trade. One of the things that kind of we've been exploring, we've been asked by especially by our sell side dealers, is to look at the idea of ensuring, for lack of a better term, certainty of clearing. And how can the buy side ensure that the trade will clear before actually executing the trade? And that's something, there's been a few ideas thrown out in the marketplace, the idea of maybe a central utility, or maybe it's something that the CCPs could provide, or either beginning of day, end of day, real time. I think that's, and from what I've been hearing, I think we're still very early in that game. Okay.
Yeah, I know that's certainly one of the core principles. I know CreditX is going to register as a SEF, and they would love to have been here today. And so certainly, certainty at the point. It's like certainty of execution at the point of execution, or certainty of clearing at the point of execution is like a core principle, obviously, that everybody's talking about, because that's key. With regards to, and I think you're right, with regards to a bilateral trade, I get this under the legislation that actually won't be allowable. I think sort of in our Dodd-Frank world. But one thing just to remember, I mean, ICE has been live since March of 2009, and we have yet to reject a trade. And I think because clearinghouses, ideally, that's not where we want to be, is in the rejection of trade.
Although that's mostly dealer-to-dealer business, right?
That's mostly dealer-to-dealer. But I mean, the way, and I think we would even sort of take the principle is that, you put things in place, and that certainly in the SEF execution with the pre-trade credit limits, but even in our world in which we are today, just to be clear, because SEFs buy side will probably be clearing before SEFs actually maybe necessarily are fully right there, is that a trade comes to the clearinghouse, and yes, it goes through its checks, but certainly we would put it in pending and try to resolve the issue before we'd actually go ahead and reject a trade.